Hey patrons, I just can't thank you enough for your support on Patreon. I am so grateful to be able to make images like this because of you helping me out. Thanks so very much. Over my career, I just love making air-to-air images because they're different. It's exciting and it's a challenge. In this particular case, I'm with my good friend Ward Hurlburt in his Super Cub airplane. A Super Cub plane is just wide enough for a human being. When you spread your elbows out, you're basically touching both sides of the airplane. It's a tight fit, as you can see in this video. The pilot is in front and a single passenger, me in this case, is in the back. We're currently flying over the largest ice valley in the U.S., the Bagley Ice Field in the Wrangell-St. Elias National Park, which is the largest national park in the U.S. at just over 13 million acres. It's a huge expanse. And we're here with our good friend Paul Claus and his wife Donna. They own one of the most superior lodges in the world called Ultima Thule. It's out of this world for a unique adventure-based vacation in the middle of this absolute pristine Alaska wilderness. And on this particular day, we're just out playing with friends. Ward and Paul grew up here in Alaska together, and pilots love to fly with their friends, flying their own Super Cub ahead of us. You can see their airplane right here. Note, throughout the video, this is pretty much where their plane will likely show up, so keep an eye out for it. Paul was flying ahead of us, showing us some of his great locations in the Wrangles, and Ward, who loves flying and loves taking pictures, really enjoys getting me into the thick of things to make photos. So today really was all about me making air-to-air photos of Paul. So here we are flying in the Super Cub. I'm opening my window, and here I'm shooting with the Canon 70-200 f2.8 lens, which I think is the sharpest lens Canon makes. There is no filter on the lens at all. I'm telling Ward what I want to have in the background or the foreground of the plane, and Ward is then adjusting our elevation and closeness to Paul based on what I'm looking for. We've told Paul to basically stay on a particular course in a heading, and then we maneuver around in order to make the photo work the best for us. That's really the best way to do air-to-air photography and the safest way. And of course, Ward is always maintaining eye contact with the other airplane, which is very important. So now I'm switching to my 24-70 f2.8 lens, which is also another sharp lens Canon makes. I always use two bodies, especially when I'm shooting air-to-air stuff. I'm using a polarizer on this wider angle lens because I'm hopeful that there'll be times where we're at a 90-degree angle to the sun and I can get sharper contrast with the mountains. Unfortunately, on this day, we had a lot of smoke from a Russian fire, so it didn't make for great wide-angle images. You may have noticed here on my left arm, I've put my lens shades there for safekeeping. I do that for two reasons. One, it's an easy place to hold them, so I won't lose them, and they're readily available. But the main reason I take them off is because they catch too much wind with the window open, causing the camera to herk and jerk. The camera is much more stable without the lens shades. And speaking of wind going by the lens, I always turn image stabilization off when I'm shooting any aerial photos where I have the window open or door off. And that is because when 100-mile-an-hour wind crosses the lens, if the image stabilization is on, the gyros inside can't stabilize something that violent. More often than not, as that air crosses the lens, the gyro stabilizers just go nuts and start jumping all around trying to stabilize something they can't. And this overuse of the gyros actually creates more blur than without it. So that's why I turn image stabilization off when I'm shooting aerials and the window or door are open. As you can see, we're coming closer and closer to a bunch of crevasses. And this is where I really enjoy photographing the Super Cub against those glacier crevasses. I'm using the 70-200 millimeter lens to get nice and tight on these. And there were times when there was blue pools of water. During our time, I would constantly be looking forward to see what features Paul was going to be flying by, and then ask Ward to position us appropriately. So here I'm pointing, I'm looking ahead, and I see blue pools of ice, and so I'm pointing toward and explaining to Ward what I'm looking for, and asking him to put us in position. So I need to explain to Ward where I want Paul to be and where I want Ward to be. Then Ward will coordinate with Paul and get it all figured out. Cases like this, it's more about the pilots than the photographer. It's crucial to have a competent pilot like Ward who understands the shots I'm looking for and can maneuver the airplane appropriately. I've been blessed over the years to have some really great pilots. Here you can see where Ward put the airplane right where I wanted to be, which put Paul in the right position. With the plane going over the ice at 90 miles an hour, I was shooting at 14 frames a second to try to make as many different compositions as I could with that great looking ice and water. As I'm shooting, I do check the histogram only to make sure I'm not overexposing things, making sure my exposure is correct. That's really all I'm worried about here. I'm not worried about the composition. On all of these images, I'm shooting in manual mode at a 2,000th of a second, f8 and auto ISO. Usually the ISO is in the 100 to 200 range. I'm auto exposure bracketing 3 frames, and I'm shooting 14 frames per second on the 1DX and 7 frames per second on the 5D. So, that's how I shoot air-to-air image. Thanks again, patrons, for your support.